Mr. Wilson. I don't have to take that kind of talk from anyone.
That's right, you don't. How about going outside and trying to kick me around?
I'm not supposed to fight with the guests, Mr. Wilson.
I'm not a guest tonight, you yellow bastard. I happen to be an intruder.
Hello and welcome to The Good, the Pod, the Ugly, film podcast where we pair movies to gather a better understanding of the filmographies of notable directors, or sometimes actors, typically one actor creator per season. And often we have guests. I'm your co-host, Thomas.
And I'm your other co-host, Ken.
You may know Ken and me from our other podcast, Fingerprints, our one-off release reviewing the leaked tape of Prince's 2009 prostate exam.
But here on The Good, the Pod, and the Ugly, we do a deep dive on the creatives that we cover in a season. We pair films and do backgrounds of the creator and the films, adding our sometimes dubious insights. We have covered such luminaries in the past as Uwe Boll, Harmony Korine, and Nicolas Cage. Oh, and the other Paul Anderson. And what are we working on this? Yeah, what are we doing this season, Thomas? And where are we?
Well, this season, we're talking Christopher Nolan for season 12. And we have joining us back for our pairing of Oppenheimer and Following, the first and last films of Nolan. We have our contrarian, Ryan. That's hard to say. It's just almost right there in the word. Contrarian.
Hey, Ryan.
The first and last word in podcast film criticism, I might say. No.
Well, you don't want to know what the middle words are.
No. Yeah. All swears. All swears. Hello. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we did Following last week, which was his first film, and then we're pairing it with Oppenheimer. We're talking Oppenheimer, the Oscar winner, the behemoth Oscar winner, earned Christopher Nolan a knighthood. His wife and producer and business partner, is it damehood? Is that the right word? A dameship?
Damity?
So this is a true culmination of everything that began with Following, kind of culminates creatively and socially as far as everybody's understanding of Nolan as the big time, timey-wimey powerhouse director. Oppenheimer.
Yeah. So this is year 2023. And that same year, we covered Cocaine Bear.
Woo.
And that's it. We didn't cover Aggro Drift, the Harmony Korine movie, or we haven't covered Ferrari, the Michael Mann movie.
Most likely because I haven't seen either of those. And I will at least watch one of them.
Can we get Aggro Drift? Is that something that's procurable legally?
Well, if you take that last word out, I think I could probably...
If he can get it to me, I mean, I have no bones.
Okay. You have no bones. Ryan is literally just a blob.
Yeah, you have to put gloves on whenever you go to his house, and he's just a blob
of haterade. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys all saw Oppenheimer?
We saw Oppenheimer together.
Did I see it with you guys? I didn't see it with you guys, did I?
Yeah, we went and we saw it like down in Tigard or something for the
that's
two
correct.
viewings. Well, you didn't watch. Yes. You watched like 3/4 of it.
Yes, that's correct. Okay, that's right. Yes, I had to leave. That's true.
And did you end up doing the Barbenheimer, Ken?
No, I did not watch them together. I did see both of them in theaters. I got to see Barbie for free though. That's a whole other story. Because they fucked up the Spider-Man movie presentation. Anyway, no, I saw it in the theater alone on Friday. It was great.
You were the only person in the theater watching Oppenheimer or Barbie?
There were people in both, but you know how you can pick your own seat? I mean, we could all pick our own seat, but pick the place where you sit. I always sit in the same place, and there was nobody in front of me. So as far as I knew, I was alone. I took off my shoes, lit up a spliff, you know.
And then all the short people behind you were just very upset.
I always show up early so I don't have to feel bad about someone sitting behind me, Thomas, because I was there first.
If you're going to a movie that Ken's going to, bring a periscope or something, just in case.
A booster seat.
Uh-huh. Yeah, they have those at the theater.
Well, Oppenheimer, 2023. for a while you had to watch it in a theater, right? I mean, it's pretty amazing what the power of Nolan's able to do. He originally, as mentioned last podcast, last episode, this is his split with Warner Brothers. So originally, Warner Brothers had Syncope. Someone help me with that word. It's an abbreviation. I'm sorry?
Syncope?
Syncope, his production company.
That's when two guys go into a urinal and they sink their... Anyway.
I thought it was when you just made a copy of a copy at the same time. But
yes.
Yeah, syncope. It's short. It's like syncopation, but it's shorter. And he got that from his dad. His dad's really into classical music, and his thought they should name it. Anyhow, it's almost no. Seriously, that's where he got the name.
No, I believe
Eastwood's Malpaso. How do you say Eastwood's production company? Malpaso Productions. They were all like on the same lot, right? And like he's Warner Brothers guy, right? Like he and Clint are just they're the directors for Warner Brothers making whatever kind of film they want to make, and Warner Brothers wanted to release Oppenheimer, like their other films, directly to HBO Max. R.I.P.
You mean Tenet, right?
I'm sorry. No, it was. I think he split. He had Tenet through Warner Brothers. I thought.
Yeah,
but that's
but it was
how it began.
They insisted they wanted to put it on streaming, and he fought with them, and then they put Dune on streaming against Villeneuve's will, and Nolan was like, I'm not making another movie for you guys. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
He did call HBO Max the worst streaming service, which maybe is why it's just Max now. I don't know if he's a guy with like a flip phone. I don't know if he watches any streaming stuff. I think he'd prefer to go watch everything analog.
Yeah.
So because there are worse streaming services, right?
Oh, yes. Yes, I subscribe to many, and Max is far from the worst.
Well, since they merged with Discovery, and it's like season 4 of Succession paired up with Dr. Pimple Popper, MD, is denigrated the HBO name to the degree it's not even called HBO anymore.
Well, I don't know. I have somebody in my household who really likes Dr. Pimple Popper and Succession, but. So yeah, he goes to Universal. Universal guarantees him 6-week release blackout, so he's not competing against other Universal projects, and 100-day exclusivity to the theater. He's also going to shoot this in IMAX, right? And so Kodak has to create a black and white IMAX film because it's never been made before.
That's badass.
And then he's also shooting it in IMAX, similar to Following, not mentioned last episode, but people asked him, like, why didn't you shoot this on, because at the time you had, like, Super 8, I think. He's like, why didn't you shoot this on digital? He's like, I prefer film. And he continues to prefer film. And he's doing this large format IMAX. And Safdie, who's on set with him, he's directed a few films himself, he thought the camera broke. Because he said it was so fucking loud. It's like, it sounds like a generator. And so that's why he has to use some of his techniques back from Following to get good audio and to have people rehearse before they, repeatedly before he shoots. So that he can get it all in that one camera take. Because he only uses one camera at a time. Unless it's an action scene. He needs coverage. He's shooting with just one camera using that IMAX footage. And then they also had to create lenses because you're not really doing close-ups with IMAX. It's not its intended purpose. And so to get close on Cillian Murphy, they had to create special lenses.
Wow.
Yeah. So of course, people probably know that a movie was adapted from American Prometheus, the 591-page doorstop that won the Pulitzer Prize back in 2005. It was given to Robert Pattinson, Batman, the newest Batman. Gave him Nolan the book after Tenet, and I guess Oppenheimer's already on Nolan's mind because he's mentioned in Tenet. And so Dame Emma Thomas in an interview showed some of like Nolan's writing, and she said, or some background on his writing, and I guess originally Nolan wrote this in the first person to try and turn this 591-page book into a screenplay. And so he decided like to try and figure out how to go about that. And so he wrote the first draft just to see if he could even do it in the first person. And then he kept working on that draft after draft revisions. And then they were like, oh, we probably should get the rights for this. We're going to adapt it. Because originally he was just doing it as an exercise to see if he even could and like how he'd get around it. And so, eventually they would get the rights and go on to make this film. It originally was, I think, slated for 85 days of shoot, but they dropped it down to 57 days to have more money for Los Alamos.
Which they built.
They built
Practical, right?
Yeah, they shot some of the interiors at actual Los Alamos so that Cillian Murphy and Emily Blunt would play out some of the scenes in the actual house where the Oppenheimers are staying.
Mm-hmm.
But all the exteriors were built because, in 70 years, 80 years, Los Alamos is developed. They have like a Starbucks. It's a one Starbucks town.
You can actually see it in one of the shots.
Is that right?
Really?
No, you can't.
That was the Last of the Mohicans style. So they built it on a place called Ghost Ranch, which is outside of, still in those same type of desert setting, but outside of Los Alamos.
Very cool.
And it would go on to win 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor. Unfortunately, not Best Supporting Actress, not Best Adapted Screenplay, but Best Cinematographer, which would be his second win, if I remember right. Best Costume Design, nope, nominated, didn't win. Best Film Editing, Jennifer Lame did get it. And Original Score was the last one that they got. And they were nominated for 3 others, including Production Design.
Yeah, great fucking score. Yeah, it is. I mean, I've always felt as an adult continually that the Academy Awards mean less and less. Particularly the screenwriting awards are mostly just like consolation prizes these days. But what astonished me about Nolan in this whole cycle of the Oscars was he is notoriously fairly private and doesn't like talking about his actual life. He likes his movies to stand on their own and people not to be thinking of who he is and what he does day to day. But it must have been it had to be a total PR move. He warmed up considerably. There was the anecdote about him on a Peloton and the Peloton teacher saying Tenet was a crappy movie, and it was a funny ha-ha moment. I mean, he moderated The Curse. They did a screening of The Curse in Hollywood in the middle of Oscar season, and he moderated because he's such a big fan.
Wow.
And kind of nerded out with Safdie and Nathan For You.
Felder.
Yeah. He famously came out as a fan of the Fast and Furious movies, considerably warmed up and became kind of just like a regular film nerd, film dad, which I think had to be calculated in some way in the Oscar campaign. But I mean, I don't think he's being disingenuous, but it's just that I've never seen that side of him despite having directed multiple billion-dollar movies.
Oh yeah. Everybody who wins an Oscar campaigns for it and presents a public face. So that's not, it's notable for the reasons you said, not for any others, Ken.
Yeah.
And there was also, lest we forget, a writer's strike going on at the same time about promotion of films. So,
that's right. Yeah.
He might have been doing some of that circuit because no others couldn't.
Because he was a director.
Yeah.
He would talk about the writer as a different person. So I can't talk about the writing. That guy, so many drafts.
He wrote it first person? Like, who does that? He didn't even have the rights. He was just doing it on spec.
Insane. He has made over $100 million off his profit box office sharing plan that he had with Universal.
Wow.
And it seems obvious now in retrospect, but this was a huge unknown going into the whole Barbenheimer thing that began before it came out, that this was a huge risky movie to be released in summer. They had guarantees for IMAX screens for a long enough period of time that Tom Cruise actually got pissed off at Paramount because they couldn't get Mission Impossible 8 on any IMAX screens. It was a huge risk for Universal.
And rated R.
Yeah. And now it's made like about $1 billion, and all the Oscars and everything. It seems obvious, but so a huge success story. His whole Oscar campaign, kind of a victory lap, and maybe a bit of a capper on a huge long chapter of Nolan going from Following to Oppenheimer and King of the World. And he'll inevitably make a shitty movie next.
Wow.
No, I'm just kidding. That's usually what happens.
This is about the time of the show where we start to talk about what happens during the movie.
I have a bit of an introduction to my synopsis, if you don't mind. This is, we've never done a movie that has been this recent and has been this award laden, so I wanted to give it a little extra attention. So, my introduction. Can you guys be quiet, please? From the 2023-2024 cinematic universe about the dramatic races to bring a product to market, including Air, about the race to getting Air Jordans to market, starring Matt Damon, BlackBerry, about the race to get the first smartphone to market, Flamin' Hot, about the race to get a new Cheeto to market, and the upcoming Unfrosted, starring and directed by Jerry Seinfeld, about the race to get Pop-Tarts to market, comes the big daddy of them all, the Citizen Kane of product-to-market movies, Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, about the race to get the atomic bomb to the marketplace, and about the moral and political fallout that ensued, starring Oscar winners Cillian Murphy and Iron Man, along with Matt Damon. So yes, it is a cinematic universe, product to marketplace, cinematic universe.
You expect him to start talking about Jordans at some point.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just
Okay.
making sure that I'm understanding the premise here.
There are a lot of movies about the drama getting made.
Not that long ago,
it's weird.
Wasn't Mr. Mom also like charge of McDonald's? Am I conflating things? Wasn't Keaton in a McDonald's biopic?
Yes, he was.
Okay.
Yeah. All our heroes now in films are the daring men who dared to make something and get it on the shelves.
A great man theory of capitalism.
Yes. Thank you, Ryan. Cinematic universe. There you go. Featuring Matt Damon as their Nick Fury. I hope he shows up in Unfrosted.
Is Flaming Hot real? Because it sounds like
Yes.
it sounds like a stage name I want.
Not only was Flaming Hot real, Thomas, but the inspirational theme song was nominated for an Academy Award.
And does the film Flaming I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I just got last night Flaming Hot pretzels because I saw that they were a thing. And I think that person maybe belongs in jail, whoever invented that. Like the Hague should be investigating that person. That should not be released upon this world.
Oh yeah, Flamin' Hot is a total thing. And the story of the guy was all made up. The guy lied about it, apparently, and the real creation of the Flamin' Hot Cheetos was probably in a lab by some guys who saw Takis taken off and said, "Hey, we need one of those."
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Anyway, do you want me to do the plot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now that you have an intro, do you have like a preface or do we go straight into...
I do. I don't have a preface. Okay. It's going to take, it's a 3-hour movie, so I have about a minute per hour. It may take longer with some comedic pauses to give you guys room to laugh or go, Ken makes a good point there. Anyway. All right. Oppenheimer plot. Oppenheimer is neatly split into 3 nearly hour-long sequences, all of which include strands from multiple parallel timelines. In hour 1, we meet Oppie, as he's called, as a young man driven to nearly poisoning a teacher he didn't like, and then his rise in the physics world to a job at Berkeley in the 1930s, where everyone basically around him in Berkeley was an American communist. There he meets Florence Pugh, who Oppie begins a torrid emotional affair with. The other threads are of an Atomic Energy Committee board hearing after World War II to renew his security clearance. And then there is a third strand, which is shot in black and white, as Thomas said, black and white IMAX, which had to be invented, which has Iron Man starring as Levi Strauss and his attempt to become the Secretary of Commerce or Denim in Eisenhower's new administration in 1953. This hour also brings the first mystery, which, like all good stories, is answered last. A fateful meeting at Princeton after the war with Strauss offering Oppie a cush job at Princeton. When Oppie and Einstein have a private talk, Strauss later feels was about him. Oppie also knocks up Quiet Place and has to break up with Midsummer, who will suicide in hour 2, her fealty to communism coming up often in the AEC thread. Hour 2 is getting the team together and building a town around building a bomb and early fears of security leaks in the Manhattan Project, which is paralleled by the building drama of that AEC hearing and more evidence of Oppie's connections pre-war to lefties, offering back channels to the Soviets. There are frequent talks with scientists and others who warn Oppie that the bomb is kind of a bad idea, but Oppie's all like, no, it will actually bring unimaginable peace to the world once they see what it can do. Humans can definitely be trusted with great power. Also, I went to physics school and learned all the languages, but not history school, so maybe I'm an idiot about human nature. The bomb test goes off. It works. The last hour is when the early schoolboy days and then the bomb days threads more or less meet, and we begin to see how the later AEC hearings line up with Iron Man's hearing to be the Secretary of Commerce. It becomes a trial story now, with each thread reaching climaxes, each of which influence the other directly. And then Freddie Mercury makes a Deus Ex Machina appearance. So before this, he shows up early in the second hour, and he doesn't say anything. You're like, what the fuck? Freddie Mercury's in this movie. He's not saying anything. But then he shows up at the end, and he's like, Iron Man fucking sucks. And everybody's like, oh, that's why Freddie Mercury's in this movie. Good job casting, Nolan, because there's like 100 people in this movie. The senators voting no include a junior senator from Massachusetts. What's his name, guys? He's trying to make a name for himself. Kennedy. Yeah, that's it. I'm trying to. Oh, what? The type is really small. John F. Kennedy. Some call him JFK. Says he wants to be president in 10 years? Crazy, huh? Han Solo looks at the camera. Kennedy. We then leave Iron Man defeated, wailing about Oppie and Einstein that one day at Princeton, our first mystery, and is told by Han Solo that nobody knows what was said that day. Probably wasn't even about you. Then we get to see what was said, and it is super depressing. Mankind has opened a box of extinction-level trouble that they cannot close. And we end the movie.
Yeah,
End
3 minutes, 43 seconds.
All right. I
just
ad-lib.
speed yourself up. You have a low enough pitch that it'd be fine. You just sound a little chipmunky.
Okay.
Yeah, that's comprehensive. That's a lot more than we've been doing for plot synopses.
Okay, I tried my best. I hope I did well by you.
I would have gone with Mr. Robot instead of Freddie Mercury, but yeah.
Actually, I had it as both, and then when I was reading it, I thought it'd be confusing if I went back and forth. So Freddie Mercury in 1950s, early 1940s America's funnier.
There was just one joke you left lying on the table about how Freddie Mercury didn't talk in the first two halves of the movie because he was ashamed of his teeth. But they got those fixed and read just in time for the big show at the end.
Yeah. Mama! I testified against a man.
This is good. This is good. Keep it in.
Yeah, that was a terrible Freddie Mercury. I'm sorry, guys. I'll edit that out. So we've all established that we saw it in theaters when it came out. You guys did the Barbenheimer thing?
No, we just watched it, and then a few weeks later,
I saw both in the same weekend. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty close. Yeah. That was a weird cultural moment that I still can't quite figure out, but I'm kind of glad it happened because it was kind of fun.
People love movies when they're interesting movies. People love movies.
Yeah, and this both of those movies, well, maybe less for Barbie. Barbie's a great movie in a completely different way, but they're both movies that don't feel like the same old shit.
And I also think that they're movies that I think people have a passing familiarity with Oppenheimer, if nothing else, for the quote about becoming a destroyer of worlds. And people know Barbie. And so the question is how are they, what is the movie? Even with previews, you still couldn't quite figure out what the movie was going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, Thomas.
Yeah. So it's the name recognition, like how you vote. If you see, Kennedy, I've heard of one of them. And then you just mark that.
Yeah, and Nolan has a name that sounds weird, but people trust as a filmmaker. They've been going to see his movies on a large scale since, 2005, Batman Begins? And pretty much every film subsequent to that, I mean, everybody has seen them. because his name registers as a certain level of quality and at least difference from the other blockbusters that are out there.
And I think his name is probably the biggest on the poster for that reason. Like, I know that some people know Murphy, but I mean, for the most part, he's I guess the lowly role of Scarecrow. I think he tested for Batman, in the trilogy. But unless you're watching like Danny Boyle films, I don't know if he's really somebody that you're clocking as the American public.
Peaky Blinders is
Peaky
huge.
Blinders.
Huge.
Peaky fucking Blinders. Oh, he's the best in that. Tommy, that's his name in the show, not you, Thomas.
Oh,
yeah, that's a good show, Thomas. At least for the first several seasons.
And this is like a short king and queen festival, this movie, between Murphy and Downey Jr. and Florence Pugh. I think they purposely cast a few people that are much taller than Murphy, which is everybody, to have a sense of like enclosing danger on him.
I actually had no idea he was a short king. I thought he was a tall dude.
No,
Just because he's so skinny.
ditto. Well, here's the question. One of the questions I wrote down immediately after, like, while I'm watching the film is, how old is Oppenheimer and how tall is he? Because he seems, it's not quite like watching Cats, but not the movie, not just my animals. But the proportions or the perspectives of Oppenheimer seem to shift depending on what scene he's in. Like, he seems tall at the beginning, and then like Safdie's next to him, and it's like, how tall are you actually? And then then it seems like people are just towering over him at other times. Which could be, like as far as like a point of view subjective camera, but it seems like at other times he might be apple creating it.
And I mean, Robert Downey Jr. is a short guy, and I think one of the reasons Han Solo, Alden Ehrenreich, is cast against him is because he's a diminutive fellow as well. So their scenes together aren't like weird perspectives of one guy looking down, one guy looking up. One of those weird logistics, practical things you have to think of when making this movie, that Florence Pugh is not a tall lady, but she looks proportionate to Cillian Murphy and his relative size.
Are you just upset that you didn't get a call back, Ken?
No, I'm just saying it's like when you're thinking about...
They wanted you to be the tower.
Those are those things that they're discussing in pre-production of the movie, that we need people that we, are that doesn't make it look weird, to where you like have the guy who plays Jack Reacher playing the Matt Damon role, who's like a foot taller than Cillian Murphy. It would look weird.
I'm auditioning for the role of Trinity.
Boom. In The Matrix? Carrie-Anne Moss.
Yeah, she's great.
Who was in Memento. Wow, it's all coming together, guys.
So, as mentioned, during the first viewing of this film, Ryan, you did not finish the film.
Not on first viewing, no.
Okay. And
I've seen it 2 more times, so I have seen the totality of Oppenheimer.
And I have a horrible feeling in my gut that this is going to be like the Well episode, and this is locked in at your number 12.
Yeah.
Really?
Certainly. Oh yeah. This is.
Oh man. Okay. I thought it was just the red hot, flaming hot Cheeto pretzels I was eating that was messing up with my stomach. But okay.
No.
Well, lay it on us, man. What is?
Just in the interest of not interfering with your guys' discussion later too much by interrupting to say rude things. This is a bad film. This is the worst film I've seen in many years. And it's at first it was I'm always part of the reason why I saw it a second time in the theater is because when I have kind of a disconnect with other people, particularly everybody, about a movie, I try and go back to see what I may have been missing, and if I can figure out what others were looking for that I didn't find. And it doesn't always work, but and it definitely didn't work this time. To try and keep it brief, 2 things that I don't typically like to mess with my feelings about a film are politics and extra textualism. There are many films, I'm a very progressive left-wing person. There are many films by kind of right-wing filmmakers that I really enjoy. I don't typically dislike a film because I dislike its politics. But with Oppenheimer, I disliked its politics. And then I think a movie should be taken as a standalone encounter. I don't really aggressively seek out information about a film's production or a director's history with the material or what they think of it. I just like to consider the movie and look at the movie alone. But when you're doing history, it invites extra textuality to start with because he's making a film that we can compare to actual real life events. And on that front, I feel that the movie is a complete failure of discussing a historical event. We don't teach about the H-bomb in school because it's very controversial historical material. And I think part of what Nolan must have known when he decided to make this movie is that he was going to be making the definitive statement, cultural statement on who Oppenheimer was, what he did, what this period of time was about, and how and why we decided to use the nuke. And knowing that, I think it's a crime for him to present. I think it's crime is obviously a loaded term. I think it's artistically unethical to present this as that story, and for him to be the teller of that story. Finally, on just a basic nuts and bolts level, this is a movie about math that has no math in it. It's a movie about a scientist that has no science in it. It has a movie about dropping a bomb, and we don't ever see the bomb drop. So maybe that was like part of Nolan's challenge to himself when he decided to make this film, was like, can I make a movie about a subject and never actually show any of it? But I don't think it worked. I don't understand who Oppenheimer is any more at the end of this movie than at the beginning of this movie, ultimately. And so I'm just flummoxed as to why the thing exists. Rant over.
Wow. Thomas, wake up.
Oh, am I back on? Okay. I don't take blood pressure medication, so I have to limit the amount of engagements I have with Ryan. No, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you for the uninterrupted time.
Yeah, I felt that you talked a little bit vaguely about Nolan not being the person to make this movie, and it's a movie that about scientists that doesn't have any science, mathematician that doesn't have any math. Are you criticizing the movie for what it's not, or for what it is? I'm confused.
So that's a great question, Ken. So that's where the extra textuality comes in. I hate movies. I hate critics who take a movie apart for what they think it ought to be. But I feel when you are exploring history, and when you are kind of the sole coverage of something in history, that you do take on a responsibility. And I don't think he met any kind of historical obligation. And that leads into the other thing, which will be very fun for me and hopefully not too frustrating for you guys to get into. But since I've seen Oppenheimer, I've gone back and watched other Nolan movies. Some, like Tenet, have really grown in estimation, but this is the rare movie that I have a hard time with, to such an extent that it has really made me reconsider all of his other movies. And like, I generally have a much lower opinion of him as a filmmaker now than I did before I saw Oppenheimer. And that's really weird.
Do you know what that thread can you articulate what that thread is that you're pulling at that unravels the other films, or are you still working on articulating it?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously I haven't seen all the other films, and it will be interesting to dig into these and see if I still feel the way I felt before, or if my feelings change. I don't like disliking things, so I'm definitely not going to be going in, loaded for bear. But his politics, I think I see now that he is a very conservative filmmaker. And while, like I said, that doesn't bother me, I think Zack Snyder has some really great stuff, even though he is a very hardcore right-wing person, and that comes through in his movies. But that makes me see the themes of his other movies. For example, Interstellar, which is my favorite
No
of his.
spoilers.
Oh, yeah. It makes me perceive those movies differently, as coming from a different point of view than I had thought before. And then he's always had things like a woman problem, you know? He really has a hard time with female characters and has kind of done everything he can to work around that over the years. That Oppenheimer has been celebrated and has the worst women problems of any of his films is just like, that is ooky to me, where it's not like, oh, isn't it funny that all the ladies are dead? It's like, oh, maybe this man doesn't really know. I don't know what Emma Thomas is like, but I don't think Christopher Nolan understands women at all.
He understands dames, but not women.
Yes, that could be. I don't know any dames, so
he's like, I can start doing my accent around you, right? Hey, dame, get over here.
Yeah, I would love it if that's their home.
She's like, yes, sir.
Oh, dear sir.
He's like,
of course, sir.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I'm confused. Like when you say like it's a movie that about science and it doesn't have any math. I mean, were you like on opening day there with your calculator looking around, going like, I'm going to double check all the math in this movie? Everyone. No. And then you're disappointed that there was none.
For example, Interstellar is one of the amazing things about Interstellar is that it explains so many highly technical things along the way. And I was really looking forward to Oppenheimer because I assumed Nolan would have a field day explaining quantum physics. And in actuality, he just decided, no, I'm not going to tell you about how any of this stuff works.
And I realize now that Ryan's a mole for the Soviets, and he's been trying to get the bomb for a long, long time.
Yes.
And he thought that this was the film that would let him.
84 years.
All right. I guess we're going to finally have to mute Ryan.
Which kind of communist are you again?
I am an anarcho-communist.
Oh, well, I was more quoting from the film.
Oh, well, that would have been my
American
answer.
Communist.
If Han Solo asked me, I would have told him the same. What type of communist is Oppenheimer? We'll never know.
Well, yeah, I think that's an okay. So I think there's two jumping off points there. One to talk about the film as like a historical perspective, and the other one as a biopic.
Can I say something real quick, Thomas? Which is just that. Part of the reason why I'm happy to discuss my feelings about the movie All the Livelong Day, but I didn't want to prevent you guys from getting to say the things. I know Ken in particular loves this movie. I don't really know how Thomas feels about it, but please don't let me stop you from enjoying the film that you like, you know, or focusing on my negative feelings versus your affirming ones.
I don't think anyone's going to try and force you to like the film either, Ryan. So, yeah.
No, I just mean, you know.
Mutual respect there, I appreciate. But yeah, I mean, maybe, and I think you could still engage with some of the other parts to this, like, even though you don't like the film, like, what is a good biopic? Because for me, like, this feels like The Social Network meets Amadeus is what I had in my head as I was watching it this most recent time.
Oh, nice.
See, that's wild to me because those two movies are two of the best biopics. Lawrence of Arabia is my favorite film and is a biopic. I think it's a really hard genre to nail, but when you nail it, as with the two examples you cited, Thomas, I think can be the best.
But you don't know anything more about Zuckerberg at the end of The Social Network.
No, you know everything about Zuckerberg.
I would say the same thing about Orance in Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh my goodness,
he is extremely unknowable, and that's one of the great things about
Lawrence
of Arabia.
That's the great thing is you know who he is. I think it's very clear who he is from watching that. He thought that he's very full of himself. He's an arrogant man who has only seen the world in theory, like Oppenheimer. He sets out on a task. He learns that he is just as qualified, if not more so, than any of the people around him. He becomes obsessed with that task. He allows himself to become a messiah. And then he realizes that he's not as strong as he thought he was. He's certainly not a messiah. And by the end of the movie, that he actually hasn't done any good at all.
Oh, wait. Which one? Which he is? Are you saying Oppenheimer or Lawrence of Arabia? Because this is
Yeah, which movie
same
are we
film.
talking about?
One of these movies has an opinion. The other movie avoids an opinion at all costs. So I don't see that comparison at all between the two movies. But I respect that I am a lone voice. Many smarter people than me love this movie dearly and think it is a masterpiece. So.
Well, I think so as well, and I'm not as smart as you, so it's not just smarter, but it's a lot of dumber people also think this movie is brilliant for a lot of reasons. I think in my synopsis I may have alluded to some of the problems I have with it, the JFK tangent in particular.
It's not even a tangent; it's just a mention, but it is dumb. It's like it is a dumb thing to include.
It's like, come on, man, we know who it is. You don't have to. Buddy.
Well, so that's.
But also, he's playing to the cheap seats. He's playing to the cheap seats the same way Spielberg does in Schindler's List, where Oscar Schindler's like, I could have done so much more, which the screenwriter and the author of the book, none of that was in there. That was something that Spielberg wanted because
another biopic.
He felt it was needed to get over the finish line and to give people an emotional feeling that isn't necessarily in the script or the book. And what I think Nolan does it's so brilliant in this movie is the way he does the parallel timelines. The black and white, I remember before it came out, he was like, well, that's the objective. That's like historical and accurate. And then the color stuff is subjective because, a lot of the information he's talking about and the dialogue between people is not.
So what is the point of the court stuff? Why is that in the movie? Oppenheimer had, 40 years of life after doing the bomb, and he spent much of that time as an activist against the nuclear arms race. He learned a lot about what happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He had all sorts of problems with his kids. All of these things could have been in the movie. And instead, the movie ends with 45 minutes of white dudes yelling at each other about communism. And I do not understand. Yeah. And honestly,
can I tell you how I think that it's both the strongest and equally the weakest parts of the movie. I think it's the most entertaining part because it's a trial, it's questioning, it's subterfuge and secret witnesses and letters. It's all the stuff you love about trials. But I think what Nolan is getting at with Iron Man's character is Oppenheimer's great flaw is not to see how petty and small humans actually are and what they're going to do with this invention. He's so focused on getting to market, as we say.
Well, he's focused on getting to market, but he's also, he is a scientist in the way that Mr. Robot Bohemian Rhapsody is. And there's something kind of noble about the portrayal of scientists in this, despite the terrible thing that happens by the creation of the bomb. But there's a camaraderie in a society of scientists.
Okay.
Well, but here's ultimately what I would say, because he's still. I was surprised watching this again how much
the most
Safdie
evil, genocidal people in the history of the world, and we get to spend an hour and a half doing Men on a Mission, and then we turn around and we start yelling about communism. Nobody ever stops to talk about how this is the most evil thing that has ever happened in the history of humanity. Did
you leave before the last scene?
The last
multiple
scene
times?
is the last scene does not to start with.
And I like also how you were like, I'm just gonna be quiet for the rest of the episode and let you guys talk.
Well,
So,
you're
thank you for
talking.
that, Ryan.
You're not talking about things that you guys want to say. You're talking about what I was criticizing about.
No.
Okay.
But go ahead.
There is never any discussion in the film prior to the final scene about the existence of ethics around nuclear research, which was inherent in the European method. Einstein wasn't just afraid of the chaotic worlds of math that quantum physics would unleash. He was worried about the bomb. And he
did say that the
knew
U.S. should develop a bomb.
after the war started. Before the war started, all of the scientists in Europe had decided not to pursue as a moral necessity this kind of tech. And that's not dealt with in the film. The film does not even presuppose that anybody had ever thought about the implications of nuclear engineering. And that is so crucial to because the reveal of the last shot is like, oops, I accidentally did a world destroyer. But everybody knew before then. He was not the first person to find out. Everybody knew and said, that's why we're not going to do this. And so to leave that out is pretty galling, to my mind. It creates a false narrative around at which Nolan builds his story inside this world where A, no one knew what was going to happen with nukes, and B, the bomb was inevitable. And he never has the guts to deal with the fact that neither of those things are true.
But
so in the synopsis that I did, I wrote the part where almost everybody in the movie says, dude, I don't think this is a good idea. And then he has to talk his buddy into coming on board. Everybody at every step of the way talks about how, maybe not. And he's like, but the Germans, but the Soviets.
They don't ever say why maybe not, Ken. They say,
do they have to?
Yes, because
they have to go on a soliloquy about what will happen if one of these is dropped on a city?
Yes, I feel that you cannot. That's like I can't even make I can't make a comparison. Yes, I think that the bomb is. There's a reason why we never talk about it in America, and why all of Japanese cinema is about it. And I think you need to say something about it if you're going to talk about it. And he doesn't say anything. And I find that to be.
You think he's completely neutral on the existence of a bomb?
Wow.
I do not know what Nolan thinks about any of this stuff, and that's kind of my problem with the movie. Is I don't think I think he's scared of having an opinion, and I have a theory as to why that we can talk about in the last episode or something. But I don't think there's any courage in this narrative.
Thomas, what do you think, based on the text of the movie, that the filmmaker's intent is once it ends and the credits come up?
I would say that there's two things that I would say outside of the text of the movie, like his son asked him like why he's working on a film about Oppenheimer. Like no one cares about nuclear war anymore. And he said, like, we have too many catastrophes. We do still need to care about the existence of atomic weapons. Mm-hmm. And then inside the film, I would say that, of course, it's the atomic bomb is seen as a terrible thing. And Oppenheimer's wrestling with it, like what he feels, how he's almost been pigeonholed into making it by his own like hubris, but also his own desire to know things, the Prometheus aspect. I think that he is terribly upset about the creation of it, doesn't want it deployed, that the film itself is extremely dark about the deployment of it and the politics of the deployment of it, including like we need a target that's big enough and it's going to kill enough people that people take it seriously. And then we need to drop a second one. And just the madness of all the Cold War nuclear strategy is kind of captured there, along with, I think it was like 12 sites. He's like, oh, nope. Wife and I honeymooned
in Kyoto.
And then they take that off the list. So the arbitrariness of all that is, I think it's absolutely there. I think that Oppenheimer has blood on his hands, and the film shows that he has blood on his hands. I think the idea that you can I think the easy kind of back of the cheap seats or dumbing it down for the audience version of we could blow up the world, which is introduced very early on. It's a statistical risk. They treat it very seriously. That it's repeated with, they go to Einstein, which is the shorthand for like the smartest person on the world, which he didn't actually do, I don't think, in the book, but like it's good narratively. And that it's repeated like right before the Trinity test, where he's like, Matt Damon character asks, what, like, is there a percentage? Like, what's that side bet you guys got going on? And it's just gallows humor because they might fuck everything up. In addition to, after it goes off and everything's not blown up, he continued, like he's looking for penitence afterwards, and that speech is one of the most powerful things I've seen in a cinema. Like in a moment where he's backstage, he's just up, like he just heard the news that they dropped it. Mm-hmm. He looks terrible. He looks sick. His wife is like, everybody's just kind of down, and then he goes in and he sees the madness of the crowd, cheering it, and he can't hear himself. He's seeing the bodies. He's seeing all these things. I don't see how you walk away from this film, and I don't need to like debate it, but I really don't see how somebody walks away from this film thinking that the A-bomb's an awesome thing or that it's like completely neutral. It's like
It's
a tornado. Like it
It's-
can't do anything about it, but it's just out there. I
Yes.
think that there is definite agency held in the film, and it is seen as a terrible thing.
there.
Okay.
So
I
there.
saw it the exact same way.
Okay.
I think everything Thomas said in that sequence, which is horrifying, that the background starts shaking. There's a light, and people's skin start flaking off. And then he walks outside, and it's almost like people are throwing up and crying. It's horrifying. Might be one of the most horrifying scenes outside of the crazy drug hallucinations in Batman Begins that Nolan has ever done.
I think that scene is extraordinarily well done. During that, a couple things that also happen in that scene. He's saying very pro-America affirming things. And there are a lot of people cheering and celebrating and singing as well. And I think that it's very important that you guys include that there were two sides to the reaction, both his and other people's. There's also, before he goes...
why?
Before
why? Because that's historically accurate. Like, why would it matter that there's two sides, like two different, like people are cheering, yes, but
because
he's
Nolan
not
is
in
having
that
it both
headspace.
ways. Oppenheimer is publicly praising his work and the work of everyone there and talking about how they're going to give it to Hitler and blah, blah, blah. And at the same time, we're supposed to understand that he's internally very disturbed, but there's no work done to make that impression.
So what Nolan is doing, how he films it and how he wrote it, is what he is saying that's pro-America. I wish we had it in time to drop on Hitler. It feels empty. I remember seeing it the first time, and I remember having like a sick feeling in my stomach because I was feeling what Nolan wanted me to feel, that everything he was saying was empty. And the reality of what he did is almost too horrifying to imagine.
Okay, so prior to that scene and prior to the site selection scene, where they go in and there's the Kyoto joke by the Secretary of War. Prior to those scenes, it happens a couple times that scientists come up to him and say, Hitler is done, walk away. And he just says, no. The movie that I would have loved would have had a 45-minute long scene where he and all the physicists go into a room and say, how do we continue to work on this project knowing that its only purpose now is apocalyptic catastrophe? And that we are denied that now that is only 30 seconds in a 3-hour-long movie says something about Nolan's priorities. That he spends 50 minutes of this movie talking about communism says something about his priorities. And what it says is that the internal wrangling that Oppenheimer may or may not have experienced about the bomb was not as significant and necessary for Nolan to portray as whether or not Oppenheimer was a communist and what Florence Pugh's tits look like, because those also get more screen time. So, like, this is what I'm talking about is, like, I understand that there are a lot of messages in this film, but I don't understand from the prioritization that he makes, the choices he makes. I think it's a very confused movie with very confused themes. And at the same time, I acknowledge that you guys are, right, like everybody, there are very few people I've spoken to who have anywhere near the feelings about this film that I do.
Yeah,
So.
and it seems like you want it to be a film that it isn't the film that you saw, and I think that the reason, to answer your question on a little bit of that, is that this is a film that Nolan wanted people to watch. And so he has that Amadeus type setup, and he's focusing on all these other aspects. And
Amadeus has a very clear voice. I'm sorry. I'll mute myself.
So I guess to that, Oppenheimer definitely has a fatal flaw. The movie is trying to, it seems, to bring the awareness of this terrible thing that we have existing around us right now. And all the missteps that led to that. based off of a single person. And then mirroring that, you also have the dramatic courtroom crescendo of the final hour of the film paralleled there, where you can see why the bomb continued, even though Hitler was going to fall, even though there was no real need to do it in Japan, is that the US needed or wanted a weapon that they did not want to bring out to the worldwide community and share and have a worldwide government, but instead wanted to have dominance through nuclear weapons that was then a race against the Soviets. And Oppenheimer's position where he is in many of these ways is because he's expendable. Like it's even said at some point, I think, or at least intimated, that a lot of the people that they have there are there because of the record. They could be used. They could use the record against them to ruin their lives. Yep. And so a lot of these scientists, of course, they want to pursue an understanding of the universe and their own esteem and recognition for their brilliance, and maybe even help humanity along the way. Like one of the guys that we see like invented the microwave, right? So like there's things that are pretty amazing in there that are part of this community of science that we see. To that, what I was going to say about 10 minutes ago is that one of the things that Oppenheimer's blind to is his friendships with people. So that at the very end, whenever he's getting the awards, just like Einstein said, like when we become irrelevant, they start giving you awards. He still shakes Safdie's hand, well, as his wife won't. Again, where his wife won't. Because he still sees, even though this person disagrees with him intellectually, he's going to have a conversation. And the opposite of that, his mirror image, in a kind of Amadeus way, is the pettiness of the Robert Downey Jr. character throughout.
Strauss.
So Admiral Strauss is there to make that balance happen, because this is a movie that's going to be a drama that needs those type of elements, because you can't really put 691 pages of biography on screen.
Yeah, and really the parallels with the Salieri character in Mozart is brilliant in cracking the code of how do you take a doorstop book. And do you think Robert Pattinson was like, your office door doesn't close all the way? Here's this book. And Nolan was like, American Prometheus, huh? And his office door still doesn't close, right?
No, I think he's like, this helped me on Batman to be taller. Perhaps you could use for Cillian Murphy.
Oh, shit. Ryan actually did mute himself.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ryan. Maybe that's good. That's good. Quick. Okay, because what I feel about this film is about watching it the second time, which was a little bit of a slog for me. I think it's better watching in theaters, is it feels like 4 hours of movie stuck into 3 hours worth of film.
Huh.
It's fucking, for me watching it, it feels packed.
So because of its length, I actually physically broke it up in the sequences. I did the synopsis, and it was like the first hour, there was a good place to stop before he agrees to be part of the program. And he and Matt Damon almost have a meet cute where they have the little interview, and it's almost like they're flirting in a way. It's a great scene. And then before they're like on the train, kudos.
43 minutes is when that happens, because that's when I stopped as well. I think I broke it up the same way that you did, Ken.
Yeah, and then once the bomb is detonated, I was like, okay, well, I'll watch the rest tomorrow morning.
Yeah, bomb goes off.
It worked, and structurally, it works great. And I do want to bring up, as far as the Ryan talking about what's the deal with communists in the last hour. I want to bring up like what I think is the best film ever made is Barry Lyndon. And one of the things Kubrick was getting at was 200 years separated from the events in the movie, how silly a lot of the cultural ideas were back then, and how important they seemed to people and how they affected lives and ended lives. But given the distance between them, they seem pretty silly to a modern audience. And that's one of the brilliant things about Barry Lyndon. It makes us reframe our own current environment. And I think a lot of the communist allegiances in both the AEC, and then they come up in the Iron Man black and white sequence, taps into that a little bit, because to a modern audience, it's like, it wasn't that big of a deal, was it? But it was a big fucking deal. But it seems kind of silly and quaint by comparison, and that those people that were involved in that are also the ones deciding how to deploy these weapons, how to have an arms race, how to detonate them, how to threaten other countries. And it's terrifying. And I think that's really what Nolan is getting at. narratively.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think our generation really. I guess I'm the generation right after you can, but I don't think our collective generations really have a sense of the Cold War in this way that like Lee Grant was up against the HUAC, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that needs to be not lost to the world because it was communists and it was homosexuals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And both of those things, like there was not a freedom of expression in the United States right after the Second World War. The thing that I kind of fault the movie for that Ryan touched on a little bit, and I think it's just a matter of making a movie, is that yes, if there were multiple Oppenheimer movies that weren't documentaries, then this wouldn't be the definitive text. Just like if there weren't
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of Malcolm X movies, then Spike Lee's wouldn't be kind of like the definitive thing. But
Yeah.
like Spike Lee's film, fucking great, like basically the life of, unlike Schindler or Ali or other movies where it's just a small segment of one person's life.
Yeah.
This movie, it's a little. I mean, we get him going to Britain for and Europe, throughout Europe for education because there is no program in the United States at the time. But then, like his Q clearance, his security clearance is in 1954, and Strauss's trial, or not trial, but Strauss's confirmation is in 1959. And all that seems to be kind of like one time, like even though we know it's different timelines, there's no real sense of time passing between those moments. And I think that is the narrative requires it, but I think it's something lost on an audience to just assume that all this happened like within 1 year or within a few years of each other. There's a compression of time which isn't quite great for if you're watching this because your substitute teacher put it on and forgot that there were tits in it.
Best substitute teacher ever?
I was surprised. Is this his only movie with breasts in it?
Yeah, I think it's his only movie with actual sex in it. So there are two scenes that I stopped the movie and made copious notes for. And it's not talking about the themes or whatever that we are arguing about with Ryan, but that I just think are so fucking great in a writing standpoint and then an editing standpoint of conflating timelines. And the first one is he meets Emily Blunt, and it's kind of a depressing meet. She's kind of depressed throughout the whole movie. I love Emily Blunt, and she's great in this as a depressed woman. And then she's with her husband, and they have the drinks, and their hands are next to each other, and he talks about New Mexico. And then it cuts to them on horseback in New Mexico after he invites she and her husband with them. And the score is kind of sweeping and romantic. And then they stop and they have this totally fucking depressing conversation about her second husband, who was the union guy in Ohio, and they lived on scraps for a year. And then he went to Spain, and the first time he poked his head up, he got shot. And that it doesn't mean it for nothing. He got killed, and she and his entire future changed completely. And then she says a few more things, and then they kiss, and it's kind of like supposed to be a romantic moment. It's certainly a signifier for movies we've seen before, but the actual text is really depressing. It immediately cuts to Cillian Murphy and Florence Pugh I think he's holding her, and he's breaking up with her. And then she figures out it's because he knocked up Emily Blunt. The whole sequence from him meeting Blunt to their scene in the desert to him breaking up with Pugh, it's really quick cuts. And the text is depressing and kind of shows that Oppenheimer's a bad guy. But enough of it is within what we're used to in a big Hollywood movie. Like it's a romantic moment, like he's meeting the actress, Emily Blunt.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. It's like I always compare that to Ghostbusters, where it was supposed to be Eddie Murphy coming in. And it makes sense because then you have the cast of Saturday Night Live getting back together. And so the film feels just a little bit off because it's not him. But yeah, exactly what you're saying. It's just the magic of cinema that makes that not seem like a terrible. It doesn't give you complete whiplash.
And most of the score, it's Zimmer that did the score and won the Oscar, right? Or is it somebody else?
No, it's not. Zimmer was prior. This is the guy who produced Childish Gambino's albums.
Okay, the score is fucking brilliant, but it's amazing in the sequence I'm talking about how it changes. It's like very tense and suspenseful and a little bit discordant, whatever the word is. But the sequence with Emily Blunt and them in New Mexico is kind of sweeping in almost a funny way. And the other scene I want to talk about is probably my favorite sequence in the movie is when, and I know Casey Affleck is canceled and he's a scumbag and whatever, but the sequence in the movie and how it's set up and how it cross-cuts with Damon on the train telling Oppenheimer who the guy is he just talked to, and then they're cutting it with his actual talk to Casey Affleck, and how Damon telling him who he is affects how we see Casey Affleck's fairly effectless performance. It becomes more menacing because we know more than Oppenheimer did at the time, but it's cross-cut.
If you just saw that scene, there would be, you wouldn't think much of it. Just like he didn't think much of it during that time.
Yeah, and I think that's the great thing about Nolan thinking on that extra level of editing that Kubrick talked about, where he can have a scene where if it was linear and it was just him and Affleck, and then afterwards he's with Damon and Damon's telling, oh, he's a bad guy, he killed commies with his bare hands, it wouldn't have it, but he cuts back and forth and it becomes extremely menacing. And then Affleck has like one more scene in the AEC stuff and he's gone. He's in the movie about as much as Freddie Mercury.
Yeah, well, I noticed on the Affleck thing, because I was waiting for it, because I remember it seeming like, man, that guy is a fucking weasel and just dangerous. And I couldn't remember quite how they built it. They're on the train talking and he talks about how he's actually killed communists. Like he went during the revolution to kill communists. But you don't see his face for the most of it. You see the back of his head as he's giving the testimony during the Q clearance renewal, and he keeps seeing the back of him. And so you don't even know it. I mean, unless you know that he's in that role, you don't even know that it's Affleck at the time until he comes and he sits down. And then, all that, like, it's not played too, like, it's not overplayed. And exactly what you said, if he'd seen that and in the conversation afterwards, it would have none of the resonance that it does. It's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, there are sequences where Nolan frames the whole sequence that way, where it's like a crime movie. I always feel like the middle hour of the getting the bomb together is the crew getting the heist, and then the last hour is the after effect. I think he still has that crime writer background where he still frames stuff in a very similar narrative way that really makes the movie kind of go along, and it's what people reacted to. Andy, my wife, she didn't rewatch it with me, but she went in theaters and saw it, and her thoughts were that Oppenheimer was a bit of a tomcat, kind of a jerk as far as it came to women, and that she loved the last hour of the movie, which was all the trial stuff back and forth, and how the black and white threads and then the various threads all came together.
Yeah, he's able to do something pretty remarkable where in the last bit of the movie, I can't remember who is talking to him. No, it's Safdie talking to him. Safdie's in this movie for so much. I was like, wow. And then every time I see him, I keep flashing to the curse. I'm like, how? How?
Same thing.
I could see it, but how? So the Safdie character is talking to the Murphy character, and he says something about, they say that dropping the bomb was not the end of World War II, but the start of a Cold War. A professor said that, and he says the name, and he's like, and he's like, oh, I know him. And you cut back to the apple about to be eaten, and you're like, oh, I just came back to the very beginning of this film, and I understand like who this person is from that very quick moment. Or that you're able to have Branagh as is it Bohr as he's playing? I can't remember. I think he plays Niels Bohr, but just being able to see him for a few moments. And he's like, you should get out of Europe, and then have him come back later in the film. He's able to cast people and give them just a little bit of characterization so that you can remember who they are as they come back for a cast, which is stacked. I don't think we talked about it, but I mean, they're like, the call sheet's just crazy on this film.
It is insane. And that, like the Freddie Mercury, Rami Malek thing, where it's like he pops enough where you're like, wait, why is he in here? And then when he shows up at the end, it makes sense. Whereas if he was another, 6 foot tall white guy with, slightly graying hair. You wouldn't know who the fuck he was.
Yeah, and I mean, Safdie just having the orange on and a kerchief, so that you kind of remember who he is, or you can make that association throughout time because they do put some good makeup on him, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, like, one of my favorite things is just building the city. And you get the sense of the logistics behind that, but only through like just very quick mentions. And there's like something where I think it's Matt Damon talking to Murphy, and he says something about like the birth rate, and he's like, "Birth control is not my forte." Like, but you get a sense of like the amount of power and control or influence that and the amount of people that Oppenheimer is in charge of, that he's responsible to and are responsible to him. So much so that like he's able to keep the Safdie character on by saying like, I'll give you 1 hour a week, like to work on the hydrogen bomb or to work with me. But like he definitely is, I think it's a movie. I mean, this is what, not associated with this, but talking actually about about following. One of the things that Nolan said about what he likes writing about is these protagonists who feel that they're exerting control, and ultimately they're getting deeper into a situation where they're completely out of control. And I think that there's an appeal for that in Oppenheimer with the mea culpas and his sense of guilt afterwards, and trying to like put the genie back in the bottle, the toothpaste back in the tube. Yeah, that might have been, he could have emphasized perhaps more and brought Ryan on board with it. But it's almost passing mentions at times of like his activism afterwards, or how much he's blocked afterwards. But you can see why in the film, at least, that he has this flaw where he's not political and petty.
Ryan, you can unmute yourself. We're going to wrap this up in a bit. You were listening. You were listening the whole time.
Yeah,
I was worried you were sleeping, or you were watching an episode of Paw Patrol.
No, I was being sincere. I can get a little heated and a little interrupty, and I didn't want to. It would be a real shit show if I was able to derail everything.
You got to hear Thomas and I.
Yes, and I'm glad that I did. You guys said some great things. There are many things I love about the technique and the creation and the performances, and you guys captured all that stuff. I do think this is a tremendously, one of the problems I have with it, honestly, is that he is such an amazing filmmaker. I just wish he was giving us the full Kubrick, which I think he is capable of. But just a couple very, very small things before we do the wrap up. A comment and then a question. A real good nutshell version of my issue with this movie is the Safdie character, because Benny Safdie turns out to be an amazing actor, which who would have ever thought? His character is very funny and charming. That motherfucker invented the neutron bomb. And the neutron bomb is a bomb that is dropped and kills anything alive and leaves buildings, machines, computers intact.
Yeah, I think we talked about this on a Repo Man episode.
Well, yeah. So part of the thing that I would like from this film is I think he has an onus to say like, oh, the sun lotion is funny, but this is also a terrible human being. But I did have another question. So something that I talked about with Amy after we watched this was Prometheus brought fire, and fire has a bunch of fire's like knowledge, right? There's a bunch of good stuff that comes with it, as well as bad stuff. And I'm not a science guy. Do you think that Oppenheimer's work fostered good as well as bad? And do you think that's reflected in the movie, or do you think it matters because it's not called American Prometheus or whatever?
I think he's a case study that our connection to our past as animals has not fully been outgrown, and we're still incredibly small, petty people, despite the knowledge which we grasp at and sometimes grab.
I've always assumed, and I think I might be wrong about this, but I've always assumed or felt that the atomic bomb was made, and then afterwards, as a way of ameliorating the guilt of having such a device, nuclear power was promoted as a panacea for energy concerns.
Oh,
But I don't know. But that is a 1980s. I'm scared of being nuked, nuclear holocaust. Thomas reading, and I wonder if not the idea of perhaps starry-eyed people, which I could not tell you from this film, which I don't think that this film should tell me necessarily, whether or not Oppenheimer felt that unlocking the atom and being able to create and harness energy from it would lead to a better humanity.
Mhm.
Or if it was strictly for under the God, or strictly under the idea of creating a weapon because they could create a weapon.
Very well said.
Yeah, I think that and so yeah, kind of outside of all that, I don't know historically Oppenheimer as a historical figure, which side of all that he would have been on.
I love that, Thomas. That was very well said. And this maybe also colors my reading of the movie too a little bit. So my grandpa is an engineer, or was an engineer when he was working, and he served in the Air Force right after World War II. He was too young to go, but he, being a man of science and a man of math, has always defended Oppenheimer. He thinks dropping the A-bomb was necessary to win the war. He believed in the Cold War, and he thinks the only tragedy of all of this is that he's always thought everything should be nuke powered by now. Like, that it's silly that we still use fossil fuels when we should be on nuclear energy. So,
like have a little reactor in our cars?
He believes that if we were serious about developing the tech, that yes, we could have gotten to something like that. And that's what we should have been pursuing this whole time. So,
well, big oil probably has something to do with that, but that's another podcast.
Yeah, that's what he would say.
Yeah.
I would invite him on, but Thomas, he's 93 now, and he hasn't learned any new information in about 10 years. So he still would lecture you on how solar will never get to be a feasible alternative to.
I don't know. He seems pretty lockstep in what we got going on. So might be the right demographic. Might be a new demographic.
Yeah. It sounds like my grandfather in recent conversations about EVs and solar as well. So yeah. I probably had that conversation already.
Yeah.
even twice this week.
Wow.
My grandmother's in the hospital. So, but yeah, it's been happening a lot. So on happier news, I think we're wrapping up this episode, and
this was the first episode out of almost 150 where somebody has muted themselves for a significant period of time. Ryan, thank you for breaking the seal.
Yeah, I think Jack fell asleep a couple times, but that's different.
That was during the movies, not during the podcast.
Oh.
Now I can just mute myself and get up and go to the bathroom. You guys can keep talking.
Ironically, the mute button was unlocked for me, Ken, trying to deal with the squeaky chair problem, which has been WD-40'd twice this week. Once by someone who actually knows what they're doing, namely my wife, and we're still having the squeak. So I've been trying to keep after the mute button if I want to move around.
Oh, I have barely heard the squeak at all.
Yeah.
I kind of miss that. It's kind of become an unofficial mascot. Chair squeak. That was part 2 of our 2-part season premiere, I guess, of season 12, Christopher Nolan, following an Oppenheimer.
Yeah, join us next week for when we talk the next pair of films, which is going to be Memento and Tenet.
I'm going to be so pausy on the
temporal pincer movement. Oh man, it worked great on Aronofsky. These first 2 pairings with Nolan are just absolutely amazing. Thank you, Christopher Nolan, for giving us a word to describe how we do this.
Or 2 words.
2 words. 3 words. 3.
Oh.
It's
Thank you for giving us words.
Yeah.
I think it's a good hype build up to say, Tenet is 10 backwards and forwards. And I believe that if you start counting at Memento, that's 10 films. I think that Nolan and timey-wimey, I think he's kind of has like a thesis he's developed over these 10 films. And it's fully deployed in the glorious strangeness of Tenet, and it's going to be fun to talk about and get into.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm a big fan of Memento. I liked Tenet when I saw it, but I've only seen it once. I do have the Blu-ray, so I will be digging that maybe twice. Watch it backwards and forwards.
If you get 2 copies, 2 TVs.
We would like to thank Brian. Thank you as your pseudonym, Weird AI. Thank you for our theme song.
Yes, you're welcome.
We still haven't gotten a cease and desist. Really appreciate it. Love it.
And if you want to serve us a cease and desist, you can find us on most social media, including Q Clearance, Leaks, Back Channels, Testimony, Slices, Marbles, H, Cyanide Apple, and all the regular ones.
Cyanide Apple is a great name for a band.
That is a good name. I feel like there's a 90s band named that, but that just could be because it sounds like such a good band name.
Yeah, imagine Oppenheimer at the end with Cillian Murphy looking totally morally bereft if they had cut to a nu metal song for the credits done by a band named Cyanide Apple.
If it doesn't exist, AI, make it happen.
It could be the band. It could be the band that covered "In the Air Tonight" for Miami Vice, and they could just change their name because that's the kind of emotion we need to close out Nolan. That's the kind of feel.
All right, the dogs are barking, so I guess it's time to say goodbye. I'm gonna go split that atom.
Thank you for having me on, gents. I hope I didn't have too much of a piss party in the middle of your.
I'm gonna make you a Garbage Pail Kid card. It's Contra Ryan.
Well, there's already, Crying Ryan. We got a lot of. There's a couple out there you could use, but Contra Ryan's good. That's fun.
That's pretty good. Yeah. All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
I want to be
what that makes
a
us
Garbage
together?
Pail Kid too.
Yeah.
Together, that makes us flash gorgeous.
Flash gorgeous.
I'm not talking at you. I'm talking to you.
Flash gorgeous.
I don't want to hear about you. I want to hear from you.
It's 10-4.
10-4, old buddies. Destroy. Kill all hippies.
I don't hate it. I just don't know why you're straight from the formula.
You bastards! You don't know it, Bob. I'm an artist. And I must reflect that in my rhyme.
I don't take blood pressure medication, so I have to limit the amount of engagements I have with Ryan.